topic. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. Truly honored to have you here. For our next session, now we're talking about opportunities. We say that it's happening in the region for now. We can see that a lot of investment coming up. We saw a lot of opportunities, even though not only for industrial, but also residents, for the people who would like to have a hands-on the solar energy and many more. Therefore, for our next session, we're going to be discussing about ESG investment rules that driving Southeast Asia solar and storage development. Therefore, for our next session, of course, we're still with our moderator, Jack. However, we are very honored to welcome the next two panelists to join us today as well. All right, it's going to be 3 people for the session. 3 คนนะคะ No, we 3. Oh, he's not coming? All right, okay. Okay, for our next session, of course, once again, we have Jack Kneeland, our partner from Vector Energy Advisory, joining us. Right? Like you said, yeah, if you have another hour and 15 minutes, and we give you, Santa is here, so that's right. I'm be the Santi for today. All right, so coming right next, we would like to welcome CEO from Constant Energy. So please join me in welcoming Franck Constant. Welcome. All right, so another 45 minutes for you. Yes.
Hey, Frank. Good to see you very well. Thanks. Good to see you. Thank you. Okay, so great. So you've got one more session with me. And the good news is we actually have another super panel, but it's a super panel of one. And I think our guest today, Franck Constant, needs no introduction. Franck is a longtime leader in the Thai, Asian, and global renewable energy business. I worked with Franck at AWR Lloyd. Franck later played a major role in establishing Sonedix, a major global company that established gigawatts of solar power and still is around the world. But I think all of you know that more recently Franck has established Constant Energy, one of the first and foremost of the Thai solar rooftop players with activities in other countries around the region. You know, Franck's a leader of the industry and always brings a lot of insights in these workshops. I think today's panel is a topic that's very well suited for him, and so I'm looking very much forward to hearing Franck's views on this. I know you've been doing a lot at Constant Energy. Maybe you'd like to start off by giving us an update or any information that I missed in my introduction.
Sure. Thank you, Jacques, for this very nice introduction. Just a few words on the company. So Constant Energy is a power company focused on solar and storage in Southeast Asia initially, and focusing in investing, developing, and operating private solar power plants and storage facilities, mainly for clients like Fortune 500 companies. So, you know, the Nestle, the Coca-Cola, these type of companies. And start with Southeast Asia and then follow the client into other markets, basically. The company is 5 years old now. It's my second solar power company I start after Sonedix. So it's kind of I would say it's just teenage, I would say. It's a teenager. It's not adult yet. We grew from scratch to about 50 people now in Southeast Asia. We have one person in Europe now. And we have a pipeline of, we have about over 100 megawatt signed PPA in corporate PPA in Southeast Asia, mainly in Thailand and Vietnam, and a few in Malaysia. That's where the company stands. And the growth is very fast. You know, there's combined pressure of corporates who want to reduce carbon emission with hard targets in 2025, 2030, 2040. And we also have a pressure from cost, and costs of electricity having gone up dramatically in the last 12 to 18 months after Ukraine, of course, but even before Ukraine, gas prices and oil prices went up. And in Thailand, we experienced 25% increase this year. I think there's another 15% increase in power price planned for January, currently under public hearing. But most likely will happen. And still in Thailand, we are lucky. We have some projects in Europe at the moment where our clients have seen their power bill multiply by 4 since 12 months ago. So industrial players are being hit very badly in Europe by these power price increases. And of course, creates even more attractiveness, the solar solution or solar as a service or wind as a service that we can propose is even more attractive for these players. So they are very keen to install, very keen to install. I would say, just as a side note, we're in Thailand. I think Thailand, I was very proud to see again that Thailand is in the lead of energy deregulation in the power side by having launched the first in Southeast Asia storage feed-in tariff in the last 3 months. I always thought that Thailand will be, has been traditionally for the last 20 years the first one in Southeast Asia to develop good policies in power and far-reaching policies. And again, Thailand, true to its reputation, and our bureaucrats have come up with a very interesting regulation that is actually quite simple. And gives a 25-year long-term contract to investors into hybrid project, solar and battery. And it's really the first real feed-in tariff for battery storage in Southeast Asia, and probably in Asia, actually. So, yeah, great. It was very quickly organized, and we wait for the result. Hopefully by April, we will know the selected projects for about, I think there's 3,000 megawatt of solar, 1,500 megawatt of solar and battery, and then 1,000 megawatt of wind.
Fantastic. Thanks for that sort of very detailed introduction. A lot of content in there, and a lot of things we could follow up and discuss. Probably what I'll start off though is stick a little bit closer to the topic of today. And as I mentioned, I know you personally. I know you've been involved very closely in ESG. I know you believe personally in a lot of these. These efforts and have really committed yourself to it. The topic is ESG in solar and storage. I think obviously we know ESG has pushed the solar business in a lot of ways, but specific to solar and storage, could you sort of give us some context on ESG, both historically in the solar business and what differences it means as we get to a storage component?
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the very interesting thing in ESG is when you look at what is ESG and where it comes from, actually. It's a probably 30, 40-year story, but I would say more recently, I just found out that the guy who invented ESG, the ESG name, actually used to live in Thailand. Okay. And I actually used to know him 25 years ago. He's a guy called Paul Clements Hunt. He used to work at United Nations. And he was based in Thailand in 95 to 98, English guy. Then moved to Switzerland at the UN. And at that time, the UN was developing the principle for responsible investment. And it was kind of, in a small office somewhere in the UN in Switzerland, lost. And he came in and revived that investment principle and developed a team of a few people and essentially got the approval of the Secretary General to develop that ESG policy and got a big budget allocated to him and tried to find a way to basically pivoting from corporate social responsibility, which was very difficult for financial investors to measure, was good things, but difficult for pension fund, etc., to measure. People doesn't go. CSR doesn't go into an Excel file. So pension fund and investor like to fit stuff into Excel files. So how do you measure that? And they try to, with ESG, to basically enable pension fund and investor to measure the impact of corporate social responsibility by dividing that into different categories: environment, social, and governance. So in a way, ESG comes from Thailand, I would say. But that's a background, and it's been really further enhanced by a number of studies, some of them from some Dutch universities looking at real estate portfolios and looking at if you improve your real estate assets, your building, your shops, you say you own many shops. If you improve the shops by having, for example, some solar panel or by having a higher better quality air conditioner or chillers, you actually get more money at the end because your rental occupancy increases. You can charge a little bit more for the rental. And in the long term, you may invest a bit more at the beginning, but in the long term, you actually have a more profitable business. So that's kind of the origin of ESG is to protect shareholder value and having a positive impact and being for it to be measurable. Yep. So that's the origin. Now in the last it's become very popular in the last 5-6 years. We started ESG with my former company in 2012, 2013, so about 10 years ago. Most of our board members were Christian, actually Catholic. So we're, actually here my church is not far away, it's in Ramrudi. So we have a kind of Christian mentality, and we wanted to develop some corporate social responsibility, and advisor told us you should do ESG. It's much a smarter way to do it. So anyway, we did put some budget for ESG, and we started doing it and developing activities on ESG. I would say in the last 5-6 years, it became very fashionable, and now every fund that was raised wanted to be an ESG fund, because a lot of investors wanted to have an ESG label attached to their investment. So you saw hundreds of billions of dollars of funds raised in the last 5-6 years that wanted to have the PRI or the ESG label. So a lot of, it gave rise to how could I say, a mixed bag of investments, and where it was not so clear which, how much was ESG and how much was greenwashing. At the same time, you had corporates, for example, corporates involved mainly in the coal business or mainly in the oil and gas business, in fossil fuel, that, were planting trees and, maybe 5,000 trees, but at the same time, they were destroying 100,000 on their activities. So, and pushing the planting of trees to kind of hide their other activities behind that. So obviously that was an issue, and there's been quite a lot of recently, if you look in the last 12 months, much more pushback on ESG and some battle between pro-ESG and against ESG as to whether ESG is good or bad, and what kind of ESG is good or bad, which I think is a good thing. It's a positive thing. These concepts should be challenged and should be checked, and how to improve them and correct them. So that's kind of the background on ESG, because sometimes we hear the name often, but what it means actually and where it comes from is not necessarily so clear.
And to look, say, historically, just briefly, how do you see ESG having pushed solar rooftops and solar energy? Clearly, on the rooftop side, a lot of the driver is also commercial. I mean, clearly, European Western countries have pushed this as part of their policies, but there was an economic driver as well. How important do you see ESG as driving the solar side?
Well, I would say we started to do solar for corporates about 5 years ago.
Yep.
5 years ago, there was two kinds of corporates. The corporates that would do a solar rooftop because it was good for the environment, and the corporates that want to do a solar rooftop because it's good for their bottom line and they can save money. And I must say 90% of corporates were in the second category. Or sometimes the ESG manager or the CSR manager would be happy to push the project forward, but the CFO would only sign the long-term PPA contract when you see 5, 10% or 20% savings from that project. So That's what we faced with 5 years ago, you know. Among most companies, you know, 90% of companies, that was the type of behavior. The behavior has changed a lot. The behavior of corporate has changed a lot. I think it's a combination of new generation, new consumer, you know, people who are 25, 30, less than 40-year-old today, whether they're in China, in Europe, or US. They want to consume and not have so much impact to the environment. And they will judge their brand based on what they do on these standards. You also have the governments, you know, the COP, even so the last COP was not so successful. The COP in Paris, the COP in Glasgow have been pushing corporates and giving a clear direction on where the economy should be going. And that has had a significant impact on corporate behavior. So through a combination of that, I think we have some corporates who are really now pushing an agenda towards net zero. Yeah. Not only zero carbon. Zero carbon is just buying credit and reduce your carbon emission, or buy credit. Net zero is really reducing your own emission. So net zero is the best practice today. And we have more and more corporates focusing on net zero. Most corporates do it in, you know, for 2040, and a few ambitious corporates are putting a target much closer to today, meaning one of our core clients actually has a target to go zero carbon for all its factories around the world, and he's got like 400 sites by 2025. So 2025, for an industrial, it's tomorrow, right? When you ask this industrial factory manager what they think about, you know, what keeps them awake at night, it's not about the production, it's not their stuff, it's being zero carbon in 2025, actually. Right. So you have some great, there are some great companies out there who are large and making a very strong effort towards zero carbon, and to get there as soon as very quickly in the next 2-3 years. Some other is more in 10 years, 20 years from now, or probably another CEO's responsibility. But we see certainly a positive trend, of course. We see a positive trend, harder target and closer target. Yeah. I think for most US corporates, previous administration was not incentivizing them to have aggressive targets. Right. Yeah. I think that's changed with Biden now, and in the right direction, I would say. So those are creating pressure for more solar, more wind development, more virtual PPAs.
Great. And that starts to point to where I think an interesting aspect of this issue is, and I'll be curious if you agree. I do think solar rooftops is probably the perfect entry point for a company that wants to go to sustainability. It's a fairly straightforward investment. It can take off a fairly large amount of energy in one big sweep. Can be owned and operated by someone else. So the challenges are maybe not insurmountable. This is something a company can bite off. But as you mentioned with RE100, or you mentioned net zero, efforts to push beyond the rooftop may be a little bit more difficult. It may require more of a fundamental commitment. And that's where I see the very top ESG firms may be the ones that have to drive solar plus storage, because perhaps the economics and the scale are not as compelling, and that companies can't expect quite the same return initially. Is that correct? Do you have a different viewpoint of that, or is that a place where ESG is important?
I think we don't see so much corporates pushing solar plus storage yet. I think it's the next step. Yep. Right now they're pushing the lowest cost and the best bang for the buck was solar rooftop. It's the cheapest power generation for a company. You don't go through the distribution line, you just own your roof, go down, get the power, and it's cheaper than the grid. No question, in 99% of the cases. So that's the low-hanging fruit. The second low-hanging fruit is having a solar plant nearby, ground mount. It's a bit more expensive. Or then have a solar plant with virtual PPA using the transmission line. So we are at this stage now. I think the corporates are looking at virtual PPA. how they can do virtual PPA. We are doing a project in a few countries for that, either connecting through virtual PPA or ground mount project or direct connection. In Thailand, we are doing virtual PPA right now. The announcement was made in Malaysia. So we are engaging with our existing clients there in their factories to do virtual PPA for them. It's due in February, this program tender. Vietnam is still been talking about virtual PPA for 3 years, but is still taking time to implement. And Thailand, I believe, I think it's not so clear whether, Thailand will go fast into virtual PPA as fast as Malaysia, for example, or whether they just do this renewable feed-in tariff, which they did 2 months ago, and then do that before doing virtual PPA. I'm not so clear on the policy on Thailand and what they plan to do. But there's certainly pressure, it's actually, I think, a chance for countries in virtual PPAs are going to be probably one of the deciding factor from your last panel. Data centers are not moving into countries unless they can do 100% renewable power. You can only do renewable power 100% if you have virtual PPA. You won't be able to do it with a rooftop. Rooftop will give you 1% to 25% of your power demand through solar. You can rarely do 100%. You cannot do 100% of your electricity requirements through solar, just on-site solar or rooftop solar. You need the virtual PPA.
Yep.
But Europe is doing, the virtual PPA market is booming in Europe. It was booming in the last 4 years in Spain. Now it's booming in Italy, France, Germany, especially with current high prices.
And as you said, it's something we've seen being developed for many years here, and obviously is the next step in terms of being able to bring large renewable energy contributions to the industrial sector. But as the last panel did suggest, there are a lot of difficulties in doing this, lots of differences across the country, and some mixed progress, but certainly something I hope we'll see happen. Just looking forward,
it will be actually interesting to see if we have any data center. We can take questions later on, but in the audience there's data center developers. It will be interesting to see their view on the region and where they plan to site their next data centers. Amazon has announced big plans for Thailand. But again, I'm not sure how they're going to implement those plans of investment if they cannot get 100% renewable power.
Right, yep. Maybe we'll just take a moment and ask, are there any representatives from data centers here? Anyone involved in a data center development that would like to address that question? Okay. Well, maybe we'll hopefully next time we'll chase that question down and see if we can get a direct answer to it. But it clearly is a very important driver. Looking forward into the future, if solar rooftops is the first step, virtual PPAs is the second step, what do you see as steps companies can take beyond that? Are there other innovations that you see? Obviously, one of the topics today is energy storage. That's an important one, and you're a solar and storage company. But are there other steps people are taking, electric vehicles, addressing heat in facilities, other energy management systems? What are sort of the future steps that a company pursuing ESG or net zero could take to improve their own climate performance?
Absolutely. So I think some of the other activities you can do as a corporate is energy efficiency, so heat pumps and smart cooling, and those can be probably added to solar rooftop activities, for example, quite easily. It's a bit more complex, require much more engineering, for cold rooms, and improve the quality of cold rooms, for example. That requires quite a lot of engineering and certain amount of investment. But those are the typical energy efficiency add-ons that you can develop once you have, on your way to reducing your emissions, reduce your energy consumptions. There's a whole lot of DSM type of activity that can be done. I wanted to touch also on, I think, in your previous panel, there was a mention about transmission lines impact and how the transmission network should evolve with this renewable, and to what extent it's a limitation to the renewable power development. It is indeed, actually, and you can only do as many projects as you have transmission line on the generation side. I think one of the things that storage brings to the picture is make a better utilization of the existing transmission network, right? If you add on storage, you can add more renewable with the same transmission network if you add storage together with it. So it creates essentially virtual storage without having to build new lines across the countries. That's one of the main benefits of storage, actually. I think the utilities who have gone into storage, whether it's in California, in Japan, Hokkaido, for example, or in Korea, have all seen a lot of benefits on the transmission system through a better utilization of the capacity factor of the transmission system through the introduction of additional storage capacity.
So to turn a bit, keep on the topic of ESG and some of the good things companies are doing, and maybe I could ask you to name names or not, up to you, but could you give an example of what a corporate ESG policy looks like, or a successful player that's out there pushing ESG and pushing the frontiers of their own energy use and climate management?
Okay, maybe I'll start with us. So we actually have our ESG policy for some time. We've been actually, there's a few rating agencies. I would call them rating agencies in ESG. One of them is called 𝒂𝒏 from Holland. And they basically rate, they were founded by JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley and other blue chip investors to rate assets and companies on a purely ESG performance. So you have one angle, which is the performance, and then another angle, which is policies, right? And they rate you on this on a scale of 0 to 100. So I'm happy to report that Constant Energy was rated #1 global solar power supplier on this ranking in just a few weeks ago for 2022. Took a lot of effort. Our team worked on that for 2 years, and basically you have to implement policies and processes in your company. They rate you on your leadership, on the strategy that you follow. They rate you on your processes, and you have to document these processes, whether it's processes to recruit people, processes to procure in a smart way and fair way. Risk management. They also rate you on stakeholder engagement, whether it's your banks, your customers, your employees, your labor force, your neighbors. Let's remember that as power generator, we are always dependent upon our surroundings. We have to be good neighbors. One of the benefits of good ESG in our business is to be able to maintain our license to operate our power plants. We are investing in long term. We make our return over 10 years, 20 years. So maintaining our license to operate for 10, 20 years is very important. And you only do that if you have good relation with your neighbors, with the local municipalities or local regions. This is, I guess, in our sectors, some of the good experience we had with ESG. I would say that, some of the European companies are probably the most advanced in ESG, I would say, at the moment. Industrial company from Europe, company like Schneider, Nestlé, Danone are probably some of the most advanced, and the ones that want to implement are further advanced in ESG. Again, a lot of this, a number of I think the US company were not really incentivized up until 2 years ago to go too hard on ESG. Right. I think corporates were not really pushed to go hard on environmental target or social targets. I think it's changed.
Okay,
it's changed.
Good to hear.
I think they're catching up.
Okay. Good. So then, as we sort of move probably towards closer to concluding the session, what do you see for the future? You mentioned that ESG's come under some challenges. There have been some questions which I agree with you are healthy. I think things need to evolve and to grow. ESG is obviously very robust at the corporate level and many other parts of society. Do you see any major changes coming up or developments, or how do you see the situation evolving over the next few years?
Well, I think we saw such a high growth in ESG-linked products and investment in the last 3-5 years that it needed to kind of stop, pause, reassess before it restarts. I think it's great that we have these debates that people are saying ESG is too wide or not defined enough, needs some more benchmarking or some, on one hand. On the other hand, I think it's interesting that some states in the US are considering ESG as socialist. I think some of the states in the US, Florida is one of them. I think Texas is talking about it as well, to remove their investment in BlackRock, since BlackRock is championing ESG themed investments. So there's an interesting position at the moment by some states, in many the red states in the US, who are trying to amalgamate ESG with socialism or socialist orientation. As we know, a socialist in the US is probably a right-wing guy in Europe. I think it's interesting to have this debate. I think out of this debate and will probably come some more regulation. I think the central banks are very active on preparing regulation on ESG checks. I think that's great. We need that. And so that the label of ESG is more carefully allocated. And so that's, I think, where the regulation is going. We can't stop it. We need to continue to, there's a lot, the first letter of ESG is environment. And, environment is really something we all know we need to work on every day. We have huge challenge. We have to, on solar, we have to invest 3, 4, 5 times next year what we invested last year in terms of new projects around the world, if we want to be able to have a chance to stay under 2-degree scenario, right? So same on wind. So the challenge is huge. We can't, we need to keep pushing ESG, but I think the debate at the moment is interesting and will make ESG stronger in the long term.
And I very much agree with you on several of those points. I think it is clear that climate really is at the heart of ESG now. It really is where a lot of the efforts are. The funding is on the environment side. It's all very important, but really it does seem like the E is the driver in ESG to some degree. And I think, as you mentioned, the challenges to ESG are coming from various sides. Some are from the sort of the right side that are, the more right-wing red states that think it's socialist. But there's also concerns about greenwashing and other things that are people talking about ESG but not taking it as serious as they could. And so I think these forces will combine to strengthen the movement. I think that it will become more and more mature, and clearly the momentum is there. ESG is not going anywhere. So again, as we move maybe to wrap things up and I'll go to the audience for questions in a minute. Want to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Was there anything that I should have asked or that you wanted to say that hasn't come up that you think the audience should hear?
I don't think so. I think whatever you didn't ask, I said. So
Okay. Okay. Well, then
I think we should maybe open for question, and probably people are anxious for have some tea. So
good. Okay. So why don't we do that? Let's turn the question over to the audience. See if anything you'd like to learn from Franck on ESG or other topics, and then we won't stand in the way of your coffee and tea. But any questions from the audience? Okay. Well, then maybe we really did cover all the issues, Franck. Very good job. As always, a pleasure to see you again and hear your perspectives. I think this is a very important topic. You're obviously close to the heart of it. I've learned a lot and hope everyone else did. I do think there have been two super panels. I've enjoyed them both very much. So thank you very much to Frank for a very good discussion. Thanks for the audience for listening, and I hope this was as useful for all of you as it was for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and a big round of applause for both of our panelists and also for a lovely talk. Thank you very much. And of course, again, well, since I'm the most beautiful on the stage, I would like to present you this one. It's a token of appreciation. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much. And Jack, you have one more?
Well, maybe you could give it to someone else.
All right, I'll keep it. Thank you very much. All right, so maybe one photos together. Jack with Frank, please. Thank you. And that's truly a fruitful session from our expert in the industry. And we're going to continue with our next panel discussion. Like I mentioned earlier, that we have a back-to-back session all this afternoon. And for our next session, we're going to cover the topic of reshape clean energy optimization on energy storage projects in Southeast Asia. All right, we'll take a few moments to capture this and then some video shot as well, because our one-day event today, we have a lot of solution to offer. And ladies and gentlemen, Frank and Jack, thank you.